Hello and welcome to this edition of EKU Then and Now. I'm your host, Doug Whitlock. Our guest for this month's program is Dr. Bruce MacLaren, Professor of the History of Science in Eastern's Department of History. We're going to focus today on both then and now, since Dr. MacLaren has been involved with EKU for many years. He earned his PhD at the University of Wisconsin and has been a faculty member at EKU since 1969. Dr. MacLaren has been a longtime professor in our honors program and has received numerous accolades, including 2 Distinguished Educational Leader Awards for outstanding service by EKU Student Government Association. Most on campus probably know him best as the founder and coordinator of EKU's Chautauqua Lecture Series, which has included well over 100 events since it began in 1999. Bruce, we appreciate the many contributions you've made to EKU over a long and distinguished career.
Thank you.
Which may be the nicest thing I've ever said to you. This wasn't in the introduction, but as you've heard me say several times, Eastern Progress identified you one time as being from southern Minnesota, and I have long maintained that there's no such place as southern Minnesota, that all of Minnesota
you won't
is
recognize
north.
Southern Minnesota unless you go to northern Minnesota, then you'll know the difference.
Yeah. But I don't know as you and I've ever had this particular conversation, but our campus, I think it's one of the things that gives us strength and continuity, is that we have a lot of long-term faculty members. Many of whom, in fact most of whom with whom I've spoken and asked this question, never really when they came here intended or thought they would be here as long as it turned out. Was that your case when you came here in 1969? What was your thinking on how long?
I thought
Bruce
I'd be gone
MacLaren
within about 2 years. I thought I could finish my dissertation in 2 years. And we represented 40% of the faculty. And the year before, 68, there was another 40% that came in. So mostly Eastern was allowing people to finish their PhDs while they taught, and then many of them would leave. What happened in my case is that I think from 1970 to 1985 there were no jobs in academia, particularly in history. And so in a sense there was no place else for me to go. And the other thing that happened after I'd been here about 5 years, I went back to my wife's grandmother's home. And she was a Norwegian pietist, and I would have arguments with each other, and it terrorized her family. But there was one day when I was talking about Eastern and saying that I would like to bring my wife back to Iowa, because she said that she hadn't unpacked yet after 5 years. And the woman raised her hand and said, "You'll leave Kentucky when God says you'll leave Kentucky, and not before." I think what happened at that point is that I stopped considering it. And then I had to make the best with what I had, where I was. And I had a much better time after that, because I didn't have that same drive to get to a mainstream school and become a full professor of history of science and write books. Because I always set out to be a teacher and a football coach. I mean, that was my first goal. So.
Of course, when you came here in '69, and those of us who lived through those years on this campus, and many others remember that was a period of time in higher education in America that enrollments were growing extremely quickly. I know I was a freshman here in 1961, and my freshman class was the last that could fit for freshman convocations and assemblies on a weekly basis in Brock Auditorium, which at that time seated about 1,575. But but throughout that whole era, and it wasn't so much because of turnover as it was growth. There would be incredible numbers of new faculty each year. And then the other thing, some folks will also remember this era in Eastern's history. We had an entity on the campus at that time when you came called Central University College, which in many respects was the home for the general education program and for a lot of interdisciplinary focus. So you're retiring from the history department, but that was not your first department on this campus.
I've been in a lot of different departments since I've been here, but CUC was an innovative creation that I think Dr. Martin believed that we should be able to teach science to freshmen so that they could pass the courses. And the job I had with my colleagues was to design courses that were innovative. And Wally Dixon, my chair, hired me not because I knew physics or chemistry, but because I knew history of science. And he was convinced that by using the history of science, we could create better courses. And I think he was right. And without him, I don't think it ever would have happened. Mm-hmm. But we were allowed under that small college to develop a lot of unusual and effective courses, I think. I mean, I was surprised at how much freedom I had because of Wally's leadership. Mm-hmm. He would accept virtually anything we came up with, some of which got strange.
An issue in higher education, I guess, from the beginning, one of many issues is how do you teach science and scientific concepts to non-science majors? I'm sure you've heard that, surely never on this campus, but I've heard tales on other campuses where science professors who were teaching the general education courses would essentially punish the students for not being science majors.
Absolutely. Well, no, I use a term called the unwashed. The science professors often don't want to teach at a level lower than what they think is necessary for them to become full-time physicists or chemists. I don't blame them in one sense, but on the other hand, if you're trying to do general education, you have to have a series of courses that replace the old quadrivium, I suppose, in the medieval university, where you get your arts education, and you have to have a rhetoric course, you have to have science courses, and you have to have social science courses, history. And those became packaged in CUC, I think because Dr. Martin wanted it that way, and I know he wanted us to create the courses we did. He never interfered with any of that, neither did Dr. Lewis, the dean. So we had a lot of freedom to innovate. And that was delightful. I was with some very bright people in that small department. I had a good time.
And you and I have never had a conversation about Eastern's QEP, the quality enhancement program that focuses on critical thinking, creative thinking, and communication skills. But from my perspective, and looking back on the old CUC structure, I don't know as we ever said those three things together, all in one sentence, but, and this is a point I try to make a lot, those three things have been part of Eastern for a long time. And I think they were embedded and inherent to the whole approach.
I've been talking with people now that I'm older, and arts and sciences in CUC I was told not to talk to anyone outside my college until I was here 5 years by my chair. I went to English department
for the ones
parties anyway.
That were watching, that would have gotten him tenured and safe. I'm not sure everybody was given that admonition, but I can understand why they may have told you that.
But I would still go to the English department parties because they were very good. And I stayed out of trouble for 5 years at least, I think. But the camaraderie within the small CUC college, I think, was pretty high, and there were some very bright people there, and we had a good time. We created a program one time where student could take all 3 general education courses or 4 general education courses in one semester. Wally Dixon created it, and they would be with the same students in each one of the sections. And that didn't last but about 2 years. But in terms of building community, which I think is what you want with quality enhancement, you want a campus-centered community of people. I remember John Long drinking coffee with me in the Keene Johnson building, arguing that students had to have a dictionary, they had to have a style manual, and they had to have something to read in their English courses, and they needed that regardless of where they were. And they needed it all at the same time, because then they shared the suffering of freshman English together. And I think the same held true. I mean, the oddity was that the Arts and Science College and CUC did the same thing for the most part. But there was a separate wing of the English department that was CUC, but they still had the same values. We were all arts and sciences people, I think is the best way to phrase it.
It's fascinating as you describe that that sequence of courses, or that set of courses in one semester that Wally Dixon encouraged, because we've all seen the movie, you know, Back to the Future. And the simple fact of the matter is now we've got this whole body of research that shows that one of the things that contributes to student success is community. So colleges and universities all over America now are putting together these learning communities, and one of their components is that the students, the same, by and large, you've got the same group of students taking all of their classes pretty much together. You know, that I don't know how many people are familiar with the NOVA program that's built to serve college freshmen, university freshmen who come in at risk. But one of the key things about NOVA is those students are in this, not all their classes, but in enough of the same classes that you do get that sense of community. So here, more than 30 years ago, we were doing that. And intuitively, I think our student success would be better than it is right now if we had maintained
something.
Not necessarily CUC, not necessarily that organizational structure, but part of that concept.
No, I absolutely agree with you. My wife was in a small program for students who had flunked out, that if they came back and took specific majors, then they were given tutors, which my wife was one of. They had an 80% success rate and an 80% of that 80% graduation rate. And it was mostly because of the small class size and the community that was between faculty and students in that. It was very expensive, but it was nonetheless very valuable for a group of students that otherwise would never have graduated. I'm fairly sure of that.